Okay, so we're back, and this time it's for the final deep dive into Pridi Banomyong. And things are getting interesting, I think.
That is.
We followed him through revolution, politics, even faced those accusations, around King Ananda's death. But now we find Pridi in exile in China.
Really is a fascinating turn in his story.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you think, exile, retreat.
Right.
Right. But for Pridi, it became this time of intense intellectual activity.
It really did.
Kind of intriguing.
Yeah.
We've got Pridi on Pridi to help us out here.
Right. Selected writings.
The collection of his own words.
Yeah.
That's always helpful. Trying to understand someone.
Absolutely.
Your thought process.
Yeah, it gives us a real window into his thinking.
Yeah, and through these writings, we see Pridi grappling with some pretty complex issues.
Definitely, yeah.
Like even while in exile.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, his lectures on administrative law.
Oh, yeah.
He digs into Siam's absolute monarchy. 1932.
Yeah, that's right.
This is just after the revolution that he helped lead.
Right, so he's analyzing the very system that he
helped overthrow.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. He's not just hiding out.
He's not just escaping. Exactly.
He's using this time, too.
He is. He's using this time to really analyze, think deeply about what happened and what it means.
Yeah.
And what's even more interesting is that he starts drawing these parallels between Siam and what was happening over in China at the time.
Oh, really?
Where the Manchu dynasty had just fallen, the Kuomintang was rising to power. He saw these connections.
So he's thinking about revolution, not just an event.
Not just a single event, right.
But it's
a larger global pattern.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Okay, so we're seeing Pridi, the scholar.
Right.
But what about Pridi, the man? What was day-to-day life like for him in China? Did you know that Pridi had Chinese ancestry?
Oh, really?
Yeah. His grandfather's name was Hang. And that detail, I think, speaks volumes about his family's heritage.
It does make you wonder, could this have influenced his decision to seek refuge in China? Almost like a return to his roots, in a way.
It's a really intriguing possibility.
Yeah.
While we can't know for sure what Pridi was thinking, that connection to China, it had to have been significant for him. It definitely adds another layer to his exile experience.
For sure.
And it's not just about ancestry. We know Pridi was fascinated by Chinese history and had a deep respect for Chinese culture. For him, it wasn't just a place of refuge. It was a place where he could connect with a rich intellectual tradition.
Pridi's roots trace back to a town called Grandson in Guangdong province.
Grandson Guangdong. It's almost poetic, isn't it?
Yeah.
This man who played such a key role in shaping modern Thailand and his family history leads back to a town with a name that evokes legacy and lineage.
It really speaks to the interconnectedness of history. And you can't forget the historical context here. Pridi was born in 1900, right on the cusp of monumental change, both in Siam and in China. He witnessed the fall of the Qing dynasty, the rise of republicanism, figures like Sun Yat-sen emerging as symbols of this new era.
Wow. It's like the whole world was shifting around him. Old empires were crumbling. New ideas were taking root. So do you think maybe these events in China planted some seeds of revolution in Pridi's mind? Was he inspired by what he saw happening across the border?
Yeah, it's definitely a question worth considering. And Pridi's own writings reveal a deep fascination with political philosophy and the idea of a government, based on the will of the people. Now, while he was undoubtedly influenced by Western thinkers as well, the dramatic changes that were unfolding in China at that time, they likely played a significant role in shaping his ideas about revolution and the need for systemic change.
Yeah, it makes sense. Here's this young man witnessing both the rigidity of absolute monarchy in Siam and then the birth of a republic in China. It's almost like a real-time case study in comparative politics.
Exactly. And it gets even more intriguing. Pridi's connections to China, they weren't just theoretical or observational. He actually had direct contact with key figures in the Chinese Communist movement, including Mao Zedong himself.
Oh, wait, hold on. Pridi and Mao Zedong, and that's news to me. Okay, my curiosity is officially piqued.
Yeah.
What were these interactions like?
Well, as you can imagine, these were highly sensitive connections kept largely under wraps for decades. Recently declassified documents reveal that Pridi and Mao actually met in 1934. And what were they doing? They were discussing revolution strategy, the paths to achieving social and political change.
1934. So he was already deep in these revolutionary circles years before the 1932 Siamese Revolution. This wasn't just an intellectual interest. It was a commitment. It makes me see Pridi as a networker, a strategist. He understood the power of forging alliances and learning from others' struggles.
Absolutely. And those connections become even more significant later when we consider Pridi's later life, particularly after a 1949 coup in Siam forces him into exile. And where does he find refuge, China?
China, of course. It all comes full circle. He goes from observing the Chinese Revolution to actually finding sanctuary within the newly established People's Republic. What was his life like during that time?
That's the question that's shrouded in some mystery even to this day. We know he lived a relatively low-key life there for almost 3 decades, but the specifics of his activities and interactions with the Chinese government, they remain somewhat elusive.
It's like this whole hidden chapter waiting to be revealed. Did he continue to advise on, political strategy? Was he involved in shaping Sino-Thai relations? What was he thinking? What was he feeling during those years away from his homeland?
So many questions. And while some of the details might be obscured by, the mists of time, we do know that Pridi wasn't simply idle during his exile. He was far from idle. I mean, this is Pridi, the legal scholar, the revolutionary strategist. Even in exile, he was driven to write, to, really dive deeper into his economic and political theories. And he was also still connecting with individuals and groups who shared his vision for a democratic Siam.
So even being in exile amidst, all the Cold War tensions, he never really lost sight of his ideals. That's incredible. Do we know if he was in touch with the Thai community in exile? Was he actively trying to influence things back home?
It's definitely a possibility. I mean, the sources are a little bit thin on the specifics, but knowing Pridi and his personality, his gift for, networking and strategizing, it's hard to imagine that he would completely cut those ties. It makes you wonder if there are hidden archives out there, letters, documents, just waiting to be discovered that could shed light on this period.
Hidden archives. Yeah. Now that's an exciting thought. It's like those historical mysteries you see in the movies. But then, after nearly 30 years in China, Pridi decides to make a move. And he doesn't go back to Thailand. He goes to France.
Ah, yes. Another twist in Pridi's tale. In 1977, he leaves China and settles in Paris, and later he moves to the suburbs. But remember, France is where his political journey began as a student in the 1920s.
Yeah, full circle.
Yeah.
But in a way that's more complicated than just geography, right? He's returning to the place where he first encountered those Enlightenment ideas, but he's doing so as an exile. He can't even set foot in his own country.
It really highlights the profound sense of loss that exile often brings. Physical presence doesn't erase that deep disconnect from one's roots, from that feeling of belonging.
Right. But even in France, Pridi doesn't just kind of fade into quiet reflection. He keeps writing. He keeps advocating for his beliefs. It's like his voice, even from afar, it's still a force to be reckoned with.
Exactly. He remained very vocal criticizing the authoritarian regimes back in Thailand. And his ideas, they continued to circulate. They found their way into these underground networks. He was a symbol, a source of inspiration for people who yearned for a more democratic future.
And this is where I think I really connect with Pridi, despite all the historical complexities. He never gave up. He held on to those ideals even when it seemed like the odds were stacked against him. That's pretty inspiring. What do you think fueled that kind of resilience?
I think it's a powerful testament to the strength of belief, wouldn't you say? And it also reminds us that Pridi wasn't alone. There were countless others who shared his vision, who risked their own safety to try to promote democracy and justice in Thailand.
A whole movement working across borders, across generations.
Yeah.
It's still going on today, isn't it? This striving for a more just and equitable society. And it makes me think about how Pridi's story fits into that larger narrative of Thai history. Here's this man who helps bring about the end of absolute monarchy, but was then essentially forced out of the political arena.
Yeah, such are the ironies of history. Pridi's vision for a democratic Siam, drawing on both Western and Eastern, thought it was met with resistance from those who wanted to cling to power.
It makes you wonder what could have happened if things had gone differently.
Yeah.
Could Pridi have navigated those tricky political waters and actually ushered in a period of lasting democracy?
It's a question that historians still debate to this day. Some argue that he was too idealistic, maybe too far ahead of his time. Others believe that he was outmaneuvered by, those who were better at playing the political game, at manipulating the existing power structures.
It's like that saying, revolutions often devour their own children. Despite his brilliance and his dedication, Pridi ultimately became a victim of the forces he helped unleash.
It's a tragic irony for sure. But even in his absence, Pridi's ideas had a profound impact. His writings on economics, social welfare, the importance of education, they resonated with people, especially those who felt left behind as Thailand was rapidly modernizing.
His legacy really took on a life of its own, didn't it? It spread through underground networks, it influenced student movements, it inspired future generations of activists and reformers. It speaks to the power of ideas to transcend borders and time. What would you say is the key takeaway for our listeners? What's his most enduring legacy?
It really is a lot to think about. It's not just about Preeti's individual, wins and losses. It's about how one person's ideas can kind of ripple outward and spark these movements and, challenge the status quo even long after they're gone.
Exactly. Priti's story really challenges us to look beyond, those simple historical narratives, those binaries of good guy, bad guy. He was obviously a brilliant mind, a revolutionary figure, but he was also a man who faced exile, who experienced setbacks. It's a reminder of the complexities of human nature, of political change, of history itself.
And his story, his Chinese heritage, it reminds us that, those complexities often go beyond national borders. Absolutely. Look at his journey without thinking about, what was happening in Siam and in China at the time. Two nations going through these radical transformations during his lifetime. It really makes you realize how interconnected everything is. Individual lives are shaped by and in turn shape the larger currents of history.
Yeah, it's like we've been zooming in and out, haven't we? From those close-ups on Priti's personal life to these big panoramic views of, global events and their ripple effects.
A fitting approach for a deep dive, wouldn't you say? So as we kind of pull back for this final perspective, what stands out to you about Pridi? What do you think is his most enduring legacy?
I think for me, it's that unwavering commitment to his ideals. Even in the face of, incredible challenges, he never stopped believing in a better future for Thailand, a future rooted in democracy and justice. That kind of dedication, that refusal to give up hope, it's something else.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's a legacy that continues to resonate today. It reminds us that the pursuit of justice, of a more equitable society, it's an ongoing process. It requires courage and conviction and a willingness to stand up for what we believe in, even when it's hard.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Pridi Banomyong's life, what final thought would you leave our listeners with? What can we learn from his triumphs, his struggles that might inform our own understanding of the world today?
I think Priti's story reminds us that history isn't static. It's a living conversation, a constant process of, interpreting and reinterpreting, and that each of us has a role to play in shaping that conversation and striving for a better future. And perhaps like Priti, we can all find inspiration in his unwavering belief in progress and the possibility of change.
Well said. It's been fascinating exploring Pridi Banomyong's life and legacy with you.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking out those hidden chapters that enrich our understanding of the world.